Managing Director of Paragon Trust Company and tax and private client practitioner, joins us to bring a common sense approach to money in a world of total insanity. Let's welcome Tony D'Angelo.
All right, so it's always an honor and a pleasure here on these Tuesdays to chat for a little bit with our pal Tony D'Angelo. And sometimes, he hits us with some information that maybe we never heard before. He does all this great research, and we always appreciate the effort for sure and the new information that we get. Tony, good morning. How are you?
Good morning. I'm proud to be among you guys, and it's an equal honor here.
Well, so where are we going today?
Well, it's funny. You never really know the impact that you had. When we had finished up our segment last week, a young lady had come to me telling me that I had inspired her in the fact of, she didn't know that, millions of dollars were being spent on these nonprofits for what was, in effect, reverse racism. So she said, you've inspired me. I'm not going to pay my taxes. I don't want to support it. And I said, whoa. Let me tell you something that a seventh grade educated man named Lawrence D'Angelo said to me many years ago, which is, Tony, two wrongs don't make a right. You have to pay your taxes. Sickening as it could be, but you got a good spirit. And when you think about, and this is just kind of a chuckle, the history of tax revolts. People have had enough. I mean, the one I always think about is little Proposition 13 in California, freezing the property taxes. But property tax revolts actually go back all the way to the first century. Some of my favorites, as I was looking at it, the York tax riot of 1786, Jacob Bixler's cow. We used to hear about this in school. They imprisoned the cow after he refused to pay a tax, and the townspeople freed the cow and said, you're not going to do this. The Whiskey Rebellion, they beat up the tax collector, and they forced him to destroy his arms and paperwork, shaved his head, and paraded him, through the areas where he was sent to tax. And I mean, I'm not condoning violence, but what I'm saying is, the light is starting to go on here, Lee Elci, that, people have had enough of, I pay, I don't get, and that they have the power of the purse. Anyway, while all this craziness is going on, the stuff in the cities, the poor kids that can't play football, the stuff in the schools, we have a COVID-positive kid, and we got to shut the school down. And while we're essentially getting into, COVID politics on both sides, I assure you all the truck is still being backed up in Connecticut under our dictatorship kingdom. Some figures as of Friday night, SEMA 4, the Lamont Hedge Fund, $14.21 million since inception. Thermo Fisher Scientific, $8.29 million. Acronis and Urginet, which is tied into the SoFi thing for the business loans, God only knows. Easy Buy, $38.2 million. I mean, it just goes on and on and on and on. And the thing is, that I really say, really is my first point is, if you're going to save us all, if we're beholden to the king for our very preservation and protection, does the king not have an obligation to come to his subjects and say, look, even though I'm jacking up the truck and all this stuff is ending up in my pocket, there's no better game in town. I'm wonderful. This is why I'm doing it. And again, I don't know whether to laugh, cry, scream, or throw up.
And I'm going to extend my power to pretty much an infinite limit, because I was talking to a senator yesterday about that, about him extending his powers out. He can do it pretty much for as long as he wants. So does that play a factor here in taxes? I assume it would, right? Down the road, he could.
Well, sure. Yeah, and I mean, it basically comes down to is, it's the thing that's well settled now, and it's been well settled for years, but with, Trump and the executive orders making changes as far as tax laws are concerned, that all rests with the legislature. Unless you're in a place like Connecticut where you've suspended all powers, and he could, tax whatever in the heck he wants every single night. I mean, we are on a major slippery slope. It's absolutely amazing. I know people are concerned about vaccines and are concerned about their children. to show you how business gets done. Again, this all goes on, while this other stuff is happening. Department of Public Health, actually, this was on September 1st, they came out with a immunization practices report, and children aged 6 months to 18 years can take a Sanofi Aventis vaccine. Now, Sanofi Aventis is a company that in 2019 was given a cease and desist order for this, for either related vaccines or this particular vaccines, all part of the same family. And then you say to yourself, how can this be happening? Well, hey, guess what? Sanofi Aventis is a Thermo Fisher customer. Thermo Fisher, again, Josh Cabal, our chief of staff, who tells us that we must do these things or be fined. And meanwhile, we have a major breach in the health department of everybody's identity, and the citizen breach with the Boston Consulting Group. And it's like, it is typical of a dictatorship in a kingdom. This for me and not for thee.
What happens, by the way, and I'm not trying to switch gears again, but back to the tax issue, because we're going to be up against it in a big way. So coming up,
major.
It's at least $3 billion in debt, and where are we going to grab that money? They're talking about a sin tax. Eventually, they'll circle back to, without question, the tolls. How are they going to squeeze this rock that we've become? Like we got nothing left, right? So what are you going to squeeze out of something with nothing? I'm curious about this, more out of almost like a science experiment. Like where do they expect to get this kind of money in the next couple of years from the Connecticut citizens?
And I'm so happy you mentioned that. I mean, I'm back to chicken scratch math here. And again, this is information any politician, any person, any journalist can read. We take in $15.6 billion in income taxes and sales taxes. That is a dwindling sum as people leave the state. Our spending in the same year, this is based on 2019 figures, $29.2 billion. So we're at $8.6 billion in the hole, and the only thing you could really do is float bonds and smoke and mirrors and over. There ain't no place to go, my friend. And then when I've got my monitor on, I see these commercials from the union saying, well, tax the billionaires, tax the rich. And then they shame these people by putting their names up and saying, well, they have this obligation to pay their fair share. I mean, how about if a couple of them take umbrage and leave the state? Where does that leave you?
It's happened. That's already happened.
Oh, sure.
We've lost the whole. And look at what in New York, they're begging the rich to come back. I mean, Cuomo was begging these folks to come back the other day, saying, we need you to come back. If you've wealthy, we need you to come back and pay taxes. Why would they? Why would they pay tax? 6-7% income tax when they can go to Florida and pay nothing?
Well, that's just it. Hey, Indra Newey, are you listening? But you're absolutely right. You were absolutely right. And what is so frustrating to me is that when you're in the dirt, when you're in the mud, when you're like, you got nowhere to go, you've got to do, quote unquote, creative things to get things started. We do exactly the opposite. And I know we're in political season, and I scratch my head and I say, if you're a Democrat, and you're looking at this mess, and it's like, the evil rich. Well, your governor and everybody there is like backing up the. Why is he exempt from all of this? Right. I'd like to know. And if you are a Republican and you are supposedly from the party of fiscal change and conservatism, you're remaining awfully silent.
Absolutely.
As this goes on, and it's. As we spoke before we started, my biggest concern is that we get into November and we're going to have contested elections and all this crazy stuff, and we're facing this with a very weak infrastructure, a very weak economy, really no reserves whatsoever. People are leaving. I mean, it's like, what happens? Yeah. I mean, it's a major concern. To think somebody's going to come in here and make a major investment in Connecticut looking at this, I really don't think so.
Well, there's going to come a certain point. I don't know where that is. I'm not smart enough to know where that is. Not only in the state, but across the country as well, where you're going to go too far. You're going to go over that cliff and you can't stop the car. You can't stop the bus that you're on. You're going to go over. And if you go over, I don't know how do you solve that. I mean, how do you come back when there's just so much debt, like, for example, when you hit a certain point with a national debt, Tony, I mean, when you're we're paying $500 billion right now in debt service, it's probably a little more than that. What happens when that becomes $1.5 trillion? Like, how can you possibly pay that debt service on that kind of like 30, 35? And then I read somewhere they were talking about the potential of 60 to 70 trillion dollars as far as a U.S. national debt. How do you pay the debt services in that? Like, how do you have a functioning economy?
Well, and you see, that's just it. I mean, right now it's kind of paid on a great credit card, which is the lending on Treasury instruments and things like that. When they become suspect, people pull out, and it's like, well, what do we have to do? Get hard goods, and then we have rapid inflation, and we become Venezuela,
right.
and that's and people, our political class is not confronting this at all, and I don't see any foresight. If you're out there, please tell me. I haven't seen it.
Well, you're smarter than me when it comes to this stuff. So how long would it take? You mentioned Venezuela a couple times. How long would it take for? I mean, I can't see it happening in the state because the state can't go bankrupt technically. But how long would it take the country to unravel?
I think a year. I mean, basically, it comes down to is how long would it take the D'Angelo household to unravel without income? A year.
Yeah. Interesting.
A year.
It's interesting. All right. Anything else? We miss anything?
No. It's just I just really encourage people that to pay attention and start to hold these political people accountable for spending.
Right.
Because spending is what's going to be our undoing. We don't need all this duplication and redundancy, and we're really going to be in the soup if this happens, if we're not already, but I think we can at least save a lot of it.
Well, maybe we can make up all this money with the new fines that the governor has announced. I don't know if you saw that.
Yeah, it's, you want to fine me for that, and you can go ahead and do whatever in the heck you want. Yeah, no, it's absolutely right. I think this will blow up in his face, and rightfully so.
All right, pal. Thank you as always. You're the best. We appreciate it.
My pleasure.
All right, Tony D. We'll come back. Bob Lazari will join us in a couple minutes. We'll chat about sports. Bill O'Reilly at the top of the hour.